There are so many Dicamba products now, Darren. I even had to have a list just to make sure that I didn't miss anything. It's crazy. You know, back 40 years ago, there was Banville. That was it. Well, now there are a whole bunch of different formulations. We want to talk through those a little bit today because there's a definite difference between Banville and anything else.
Dicamba is one of the top 5 compounds being used in U.S. agriculture today. So it's a widely used herbicide chemistry, but it's mainly been for corn. And when we think about now soybeans getting a whole bunch of Dicamba used, it's really going to explode for this molecule. It's going to be a lot of acres, which means there's going to be quite a bit of competition with different manufacturers making Dicamba. When we see some of that come in, especially when we look at foreign imports coming into our country, we may see some of the basic Dicamba acid, which has tremendous volatility issues. And when you think about it, all Dicambas are not the same. That's why I wanted to talk about it on today's show.
Okay, so Darren mentioned Dicamba acid. Well, nobody's going to sell straight Dicamba acid, but just so you understand, what we get worried about with Dicamba in general is the movement of the product. There are two different things. There's physical drift, and then there's volatility. The physical drift, everybody knows what that is. It's when you're spraying, the wind moves something off target. Okay, pretty simple to avoid. You just don't spray when the wind is blowing toward a sensitive crop. All right, easy to handle. The volatility, that's really the struggle. And that's where straight old Dicamba acid was really bad, where basically it could get sprayed down, and if you happen to have a temperature inversion, especially like the next morning, it was easy for some of that stuff to come off the plant, rise up, and move over to another field, drop down, and damage a field. Now the good news here is a lot of sensitive crops really aren't that super sensitive. So I've seen some studies out that completely contradict what we've actually seen for results in the field over the years. So for example, there was something that said, oh, if you have 1/1000th of a rate of Dicamba, like Banville or Clarity, that hits your soybeans, it's going to damage yield 5 or 10 bushels. I don't believe that at all. What we've seen in the field is if all we do is curl the leaves a little bit with Dicamba, it hasn't hurt yield. In fact, many times it's helped yield. I've literally had farmers come to me and say, I want to spray Dicamba on my soybeans because last year when I had a little drift, it helped my yield. So I don't believe all that talk about, oh, little curling of the leaves, that's not hurting your yield. What does hurt the yield is when you shorten the plants. So that's kind of how you tell the difference. Curling the leaves, no big deal. If you actually shorten the plants, that's a problem. And I don't care whether it's from physical drift or volatility, either one we've got to really watch out for though.
All right, on our farm, we used to use Banville. That was the Dicamba product that was out when we were young. And Dicamba, farmers knew what to do with that. Like Brian said, try not to spray when it's windy. That avoids the physical part. And then in terms of the volatility, look for the right weather to make sure you don't have a big problem there. So if you see those kind of weather conditions come up that Brian was talking about with temperature inversions, with the foggy morning, those kinds of things, or you see the next day is going to be super windy, whatever, just avoid spraying. Let's just wait a few days before we do it. That was okay. Then Clarity came up. Clarity had significantly less volatility than Banville, and that really helped things in agriculture. We saw a lot less drift type issues, and we actually saw really good performance too. The thing about Clarity, as Dicamba got used more, is that we found out Dicamba doesn't really work that great when it's really cold. And guys wanted to use Dicamba in a burn down because it was a much better product than what 2,4-D was at the time. And so guys started trying to use that as a burn down out in front of corn and found, you know, we do have to wait till the temperature warms up if we want this to work.
All right, so the other issue has always been on corn, is it safe for the corn? Well, now there are safeners. So for example, you can get Diflex, which is basically the same type of thing as Clarity plus a corn safener. That's great. There's also Status, where there's a safener in there and there is some Dicamba, but the main weed killer is not Dicamba, it's diflufenzapyr. So don't get confused. Status is dramatically different than Diflex. In addition to that, you've got these new products that are coming out. Ingenia, that's got the BAPMA salt. That's going to be from BASF. And with Ingenia, that has dramatically less volatility than even Clarity did. Okay, so that's great. And that's going to be their soybean product. Monsanto's going to have a soybean product also to go over the top of Xtend beans called Extendamax. Extendamax is nothing more than old Clarity plus this vapor grip product to reduce volatility and drift. So they're kind of going about it two different ways. BASF is using a different salt to reduce volatility. Monsanto is using some other product they're adding to the old Dicamba to reduce volatility. And also understand the rates are going to be dramatically different. So the rate of Ingenia is even less than what it is for Clarity to get the same active ingredient, but the rate for XtendiMax is going to be more.
If you're a farmer that's been using dicamba in the past, here's one thing that's greatly changed: what you put with it. Ammonium sulfate used to be a typical additive for a dicamba application, but what the studies have shown is that ammonium sulfate increases volatility, so we're advising no use of ammonium sulfate using any of these dicamba products.
So there are now many different dicamba products that are going to be on the market today. Just pick the right one for your particular situation. Well, one of the weeds that might show up in your field where you might be thinking, hey, dicamba is the product to use, it could be our weed of the week. We'll talk about it coming up next.